Good morning, beautiful. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Joesephyr and welcome to another Dissidia Should You Pull video. And today's video we're going to be discussing just one banner that's coming out this week and then another that we have speculation on what's going on for the May Faire at the start of next week. So if you'd like to join me in learning more about Alphinaud, Wakka, Yshtola and Freya, then stay tuned and keep on watching. Before we get started, of course, don't forget to check out all of my social media links in the description box below, including Twitter, Twitch, Discord, and Patreon. Over on my right here, you can see my schedule for Twitch this week, where you can see I stream most days in the week, although this week's a little bit calmer than last week's 7 streams in 6 days was. So if you'd like to come along and join me for any of those, including any events in Opera Omnia, then I encourage you to do so. We will have a lovely, chilled time over there. On Patreon, I do always shout out one of my patrons every time I release a video. That's my members only website where people can subscribe to it to get loads of additional benefits, including title cards that I make just for my patrons, private streams, private voice chats, all sorts of things, including some that we'll be doing this week, in fact. And as I say, I do shout out one of my patrons every time I release a video. And today that person is going to be Sir Will, who is one of my longest standing patrons and is a Tales fan, as is shown by their title card, as am I. So thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to make that. And of course, don't forget to check out all of the other content creators and resources out there for Dissidia Opera Omnia, including Dissidia Compendium, Dissidia Info, DissidiaDB.com, the Tombury Troupe and their fabulous infographics, and of course Mediu and Leo Bob for their fabulous translations over on Reddit. Okay, so let's jump right in and take a look at the banner that's going to be released this week, and it's going to be Alphinaud and Wakka's banner. So the banner itself is going to contain Wakka and Alphinaud's full kit, including Alphinaud's brand new LD. Kurosame's EX, only his EX, sadly not his LD, so anyone who's missed out on that isn't going to be able to get that here. And then finally, Kieran BT as well. Now, ordinarily this would have been the last chance to get Kieran BT, but we know that there's something coming in the May Faire, which we'll get to in a bit, that will also contain it. So let's talk about this banner to begin with. Wakka is just more Wakka. Like, if you've used Wakka before, his main sort of draws are his blind that he inflicts through his dark attack, which has now been reworked to inflict blind to all enemies, so that's good. And brave reels, which is a large max bravery bonus to him, and then attack reels gets reworked as well so that it does more HP dumps. That's pretty much it. And the captain's order buff gives him more bravery gens and more damage to himself. And then status reels, which is the primary reason you'd use him, is still an RNG based debuff, whether it either just decreases their stats, paralyzes them, or freezes their bravery. You get one of those three things. But status reels itself has been updated, so at least that debuff has 10% HP damage taken up as well as bravery damage. So if you like Wakka, then he just does more Wakka. There's nothing really particularly noteworthy here outside of that. Although I will say his LD call is still useful in certain situations, because the fact that it's RNG based, whether they get confused or frozen with their bravery, means that there are certain things that status reels circumvents in terms of immunities that other characters can't. So for example, with Shulk's Lost chapter, you can confuse the enemy, which you couldn't do like ordinarily like you could when it first came out, because they added an immunity to confusion, but not to status reels. So there is something to be said for that. Alphinaud gets a rework as well. His rework basically is, again, more HP dumps, bringing him up to date with current sort of era of damage, things like that. Energy Drain now has splash damage on it and still heals the party for a decent amount. The Moonstone, honestly, you very rarely ever use the Moonstone buff, apart from to charge the EX to then replace the Moonstone with the Obsidian Carbuncle. If you haven't used Alphinaud before, he's reliant on his Carbuncle to provide a lot of party auras, as well as some of his attacks, so you have to keep that active at all times. So his EX has been, had its rework as well, and that also reworks the other attacks that come off of it. So Obsidian Combination is now a 4-hit Brave HP attack, which is pretty great actually, considering that it's also an instant turn and you'll get another attack after it, but it's not gonna break the bank. Shadow Flare, which is his Sap Aura, now triggers when ally or enemy turn begins, so you get bravery back from Sap every turn, which does play into one of his issues. And it also makes his Sick Obsidian, which was his attack that you'd use to refund bravery to himself, a double HP attack with full AoE damage. That also fills his recast gauge up, and Shining Obsidian is now inflicting defense down as well as giving you the free skill that he's always had. So his main draw was that he basically never ran out of skills because his HP plus, Shining Obsidian, made it so your next skill didn't consume ability usage. So you'd be able to cycle through Shining Obsidian, then his energy drain, then Shining Obsidian again, and then you'd just be able to recharge his EX, and then you'd just go off that way. His LD rectifies one of his biggest problems and then presents another one. So Meteorologica is a 4-hit Brave HP attack to one target 4 times, and you'll get splash damage and you get a buff on him. And the buff is actually pretty great considering all the other stuff that Alphinaud can do, which is party Brave and HP damage up, Brave overflows, and the party cannot be broken. This is actually pretty good. Like, he's not the first character to do something like this. Ursula does a similar kind of thing. But Alphinaud does have the drawback that he's always had of if he was ever broken, he would lose his carbuncle, and if you ever lost your obsidian carbuncle, going back to getting it to get to his EX was always a bit of a pain. But now you don't have to worry about that because it's physically impossible for Alphinaud to get broken apart from this buff being dispelled. And you get Bio 2 and Miasma 2, which is a debuff to all enemies, which is 20% brave damage up, and anytime enemy or ally acts, they receive HP damage. So it's an HP version of his Bravery Sap aura. This is similar to X-Death or Ida, but it triggers every turn without fail. So it's more similar to X-Death's BT effect, and it sounds fantastic. However, there are 2 things that are very, very big notes against Alphinaud that a lot of people will remind you of, and I'll do the same. First of all the saps, all the HP damage, all of this, that, and the other, and the bravery regens, Alphinaud does so many little things that they all add up together and they slow down your pacing in terms of actual time spent on a mission quite considerably. And when FR era comes about and we start looking at FR scaling, percentage-based damage increased by FR attacks, HP poison isn't affected by that, and that's kind of sad because it means that Alphinaud he's not completely useless. Like, he has the ability to use his EX and then energy drain for pretty big damage if you wanted to, but his HP poison doesn't scale with that damage, so it means that you would rather just use somebody who had off-turn damage that did. So your main reasons to want to pull for him are for the purposes of not being broken, having decent auras, regens, like healing, things like that. And the HP poison is nice, it just be warned that it probably won't last in terms of lifespan of the game as much as you think it would. So the next 2 characters that I'm going to talk about here are more speculative than anything, but I do believe that we have a good guess as to who these characters might be with relation to the May Faire banners, one of them more so than the other. But due to the fact that on Seymour's banner, as you can see here, Yshtola LD is present on the Japanese side of things, whereas for us, we got 9 instead. So where's Yshtola gone? Combine that with the fact that alongside the Varn and Kieran banners, we had this banner here, which had Yshtola's BT on it alongside Setzer LD with no additional benefits or anything. It makes me pretty certain that one of those May Faire banners is going to contain Yshtola's C90 along with a BT reprint. So Yshtola's BT reprint and C90 here gives her a rework, so it adds an additional turn of delay onto stone and additional HP dump as well, which makes it significantly better for today's era. Medica 2 just does more Medica 2, it heals better, it batteries better, and now it's an instant turn rate as well. The EX is a hard one to augment really, because all it does is heal. So without adding a buttload of unnecessary HP dumps or having an Afflatus Misery follow it up or something, it's a weird one to augment. But all it does here is make it so that Yshtola's bravery and HP damage is increased more after she's used it for 4 turns. The LD board, however, gets a pretty nice addition to it, and all it is realistically is damage, as well as an effect that's added to her Blood Lily in general. So it removes the condition for when parties' bravery is above the initial bravery at the start of their turn, which means that you can use Yshtola with a much wider array of characters because she's not requiring them to have large amount or bravery in general at the start of their turn, and that works very well for a large number of characters. Anyone who doesn't refund bravery at the end of their turns, but maybe you come across another way of battering them and they deal a lot of brave shaving instead. And Afflictus Misery, now it has 5 HP dumps in it, which is a lot. And Scion's Holy has 3 HP dumps in it and is still an instant turn rate with a rebreak on it. So that's also really good. Yshtola is definitely still a solid character. Her BT effect is still very good. It has 50% brave gains up on it, but she's not on her own for that anymore. There's a lot of characters that have brave gains up and also have like HP cap up and like attack up and a lot more benefits, because Yshtola was like one of the first BTs to come out with BT+, so it's not surprising that while she's still good, there are other characters that meet or even exceed her, but the fact that she's keeping up this well is very cool. And then the last character I want to talk about here, again, more speculative than anything, so forgive me if it turns out that this is not the case, but due to the fact that 9 was on Seymour's banner instead of Yshtola, it gives me reason to believe that the other banner might contain Freya. And Freya was originally on Snow's batch, which isn't available just yet, but I think we're going to get a different character with Snow's batch at the end when we see the Dimensions End Transcendence campaign. So Freya would be the LD character here that was brand new. What was on her banner, I'm not entirely sure. We'll have to wait and see. But this is the banner that I think we're going to see alongside Kieran's BT's last sort of ride. So we're going to talk about Freya, and if I'm wrong, I apologise in advance. But at least I've gotten the information there in case we need it, or in case we want it and don't need it, but rather than we need it and don't have it. So Freya gets a rework here, so basically you get Rhys's Wind, which is her party-wide HP regen, which was always her thing. She was like the OG HP regenning offensive support character, and she was always very good at it, but she's always kind of been left to the wayside in later eras because she was just always late on the uptake. And you could argue that that was true here, but there are some very cool uses for Freya. So she gets a double HP dump following up from Rhys's Wind, which is now like just the standard thing for her to set her buffs ready. Dragon Breath now has 4 HP dumps in it, and it has splash damage as well. Her EX, which granted party-wide last stand, which was her kind of main draw in her EX, and then we obviously saw other characters that did similar kinds of things that made it so people weren't really using Freya all that much. But this now has 4 HP dumps in it, makes it so she deals more damage. Her LD is also very good. If you've seen Kane's LD, where he jumps up into the air and does additional off-turn attacks between every turn until he comes back down, Freya does exactly the same thing. Like, exactly the same. However, she does do something that Kane doesn't do. When she goes up in the air, whenever she throws down spears through her Descending Dragon attack, her spear also heals the party. So there are going to be situations where you would want Freya and not Kane, and this extends into Faria a little bit as well, because there are situations where you're going to be taking a lot of damage from enemies, and you want to be able to heal quickly. Kane will do more damage than Freya. There's no two ways about that once his BT arrives, because his spear, or his thrown spear, deals 2 HP dumps and obviously does a lot more damage in general. He has a BT, so there's that. But obviously having access to healing whilst doing this, and she's still going to have party-wide last stand while she's up in the sky, so you could benefit from that. And I think that having 2 characters that can do that, like in, as the old meme says, why not both? You could have Kane and Freya up in the sky while you have a turn-hogging character just slinging attacks, and because Freya and Kane and Dragoon characters like these have this thing where they don't take turns for ages, they have a high action delay when they go up in the sky, you can then give them something like a call ability that's going to be really good for a long period of time. Let's use Leo as an example. Say your character that you are attacking with is using a lot of single target attacks that start with single bravery attacks. You're going to benefit from Leo. So why not have Freya go up with Leo so that someone else can benefit from it? Kurasame is going to be even more important going forward if you're a fan of Camlanor. So having Freya or Kain go up in the sky with an ice enchant on them is going to make your Camlanor 10 times better. So while I think that Freya is really good, and I probably will throw some tickets at her because I like her and she's FF9, it is worth mentioning that she comes back fairly early on in FR era, and Kain will also deal a lot more damage than Freya would. So whether you wanted to go for her here is entirely up to you. I would say it would depend entirely on whether you were planning on using her between now and Ursula's FR banner, which is when she returns. So I probably would, but I'm not going to cry about it if I don't get her now. I would, however, like to get her at some point. So let's now take a look at the events that come along with Alphinaud and Wakka, and it's the only event we do actually know anything about because we don't know what's going to come around with the May Faire event. So taking a look at the Chimeras, it's a fairly simple event. It's not a particularly challenging one provided you deal with the orb, because it is a very restrictive orb. The count target has to take HP damage due to a debuff, buff or special effect, which means it has to be HP poison. It can't be something like Laguna, it can't be something like a trap, it has to be HP poison, which means there are only 3 characters that can fulfill that condition, namely Alphinaud, Exdeath and Ida. Now, realistically you want to be using Alphinaud in one fashion or another, or Exdeath's BT effect to do it, because you're going to want to be able to do it during ally turns as well as enemy turns for you to be able to then just blitz the enemy and do what you need to do. However, it doesn't have to be your Alphinaud or Exdeath. You can use a friend unit one, so I would suggest if you happen to have Alphinaud or Exdeath, pop them up as a friend unit because it will be very helpful to people who don't necessarily want to pull on those characters. I will be pulling for Alphinaud, and we'll get to that in a little while, so I will be putting mine up for that purpose as well. Past that, the only things you really have to worry about are the fact that the enemies can put up a yellow aura, which makes it so they only take 1 HP damage from everything. So Brave Gains are going to be really powerful here. So Selfie's really good. There's lots of characters that can fulfill that. If you're using Alphinaud with player turns, you can use Charlotta to do it if you wanted to. There's a lot of support-based characters that will work very well here. I've actually seen a duo run of Alize and Alphinaud tackle this run, and they work really well together because of the fact that Alize batteries herself using Alphinaud's ability to not be broken as a kind of way to get around the fact that the enemy's still going to get turns. But it doesn't have to be anything quite like that. You can use whoever you want for this realistically, provided that you are taking something to deal with the HP poison, because past that, it's really not a particularly challenging event. So now let's move over into Would You Pull, the section of the video where you, the viewer, get your chance to let your voice be heard on these banners. So we're going to go straight into the numbers. A massive thank you, of course, goes out to all of my patrons for casting their votes and their comments. And if you'd like to join in and be part of the discussion, everything is available on the link in the description box below for my Patreon if you want to join in with this. So looking at Alphinaud and Wakka's banner, we have 11% of people saying that they're going to use gems here, 26% of people saying they're going to use 100 or more tickets, 19% of people saying they're going to use less than 100 tickets, and 44% of people saying no thank you. Now, until very recently, I was very much in the no thank you batch. Alphinaud was one of my favourite characters in Final Fantasy history. But I think it's okay to separate your favouritism from a character from one place for a character in another. And the poison, the slowness of the aspects of Alphinaud's kit, the way in which his poison doesn't scale in FI era were all very off-putting to me. So I kind of thought to myself, do you know what? I'll just stick to loving him in Final Fantasy XIV. However, I was asked by a lot of my viewers to put up a goal to make an Alphinaud saga. So instead of not pulling for Alphinaud, I am now going to be using Alphinaud in every event between now and FR era. The only one that really concerns me with that is going to be Dimensions in Transcendence 9, because I'm not looking forward to using that against the Angry Hawks, but we'll figure that one out as we come to it. But we're going to be using Alphinaud a lot in the next couple of months. So I have now gone from the no thanks batch into the yes gems batch, so it's gone a bit weird. Then going over into Yshtola's banner, I did not put one up for Freya's banner because I'm less certain that that's going to be Freya. fairly sure, but not certain enough that I wanted to put up a would you pull poll for her, and it turned out to be wrong, and then I look a complete fool. So, for the first time ever, I believe, on this channel, 100% of people said no thank you to this banner, even with Yshtola's rework being here. Whether that's because people already have Yshtola, because I was a donut and didn't put that as an option on the poll, or because people just aren't interested in her because there's a lot of other characters that can do what she can do, remains to be seen. But no one's pulling on this banner, it would seem. So let's go ahead and see some comments. Pale Raider says hard pass on both banners. I have everything except Alphinaud and his kit just doesn't interest me. I have 2 HP poisons ready, not that this niche will be useful in FR, and I already have characters to stop my party getting broken. After a full pity for LD on Leo, and with 2 more banners from Snow's badge demanding resources, there's little room for tomfoolery with other banners, especially when they're as weak as this. Not to sound nasty, but I wouldn't recommend these banners even to newer players. See, that's the thing, is I probably agree with this. Like, they're not great characters here. Yes, Wakka's LD call has niche use, and yes, Alphinaud is a favourite of mine, but when it came to recommending this from a purely objective point of view, or as little bias as I can, because there is no such thing as pure objectivity, these aren't banners I would say that people should pull on at all. But there's a lot of people that love Alphinaud, there's a lot of people that don't love Alphinaud, so there's going to be some contention on that front. So Will, who was our featured patron of the day, says even if he's not great and I'm running a little low on tickets after trying to get the Seymour call, Alphinaud is still one of my favourite characters and from 14, so I want him, if only to use him a little in his event and a DE. So I'll throw some tickets at him. Less than 100 probably, at least until I lose control and use even more. I already have Wakka. I mean, being honest with myself, I probably would have done this. Like, even if I, didn't have this saga thing that we're going to do, I probably would have caved, because I do really love Alphinaud, and while I'm not the kind of person that goes pull for favourites and nothing else, because I think it's okay to separate favouritism from one place to another. You know, a good example of that being, I love Kuja. I don't like him in Dissidia because I think he's really boring, and I've fallen for it more than once, and it made me enjoy him less. So there are ways of talking about that aren't necessarily pull for favourites, pull for meta. It's not as black and white as that. I could make an entire video discussing this kind of thing. Let me know in the comments below if that's something that you want to see. Cobalt Zork says, these banners are great for me as my tickets have taken a serious dent recently. 600 tickets to not get Steiner was not my proudest moment. Alphinaud is an easy skip by virtue of not bringing anything to the table I need and doesn't do a great job with those things he does bring. A shame, as I loved him in EX Plus era. Me too. Wakka's already built, but it'll be good to crack him out again. He's not amazing, but that LD debuff, while random, fluctuates between really good and just good, which is good RNG. Yshtola Setzer is one I have everything on, so no need to pull there at all. Yshtola's currently 0 out of 3 on her BT+, because I needed the ingot, so I don't think I'll green her at this stage as I can cover what she brings elsewhere, but it'll be nice to dig out these old favourites for a fresh run. And then finally, Multiracial Lion says, I'll be using tickets for Alphinaud. He's second only to Yshtola in terms of my favourite signs, and I've always really loved the way his kit plays ever since he got his EX. Now we get more support, more damage, and HP poison. Yes, I'll have that, thanks. I've got Wakka's full kit, so I'm set there. However, if I didn't have his LD, I'd 100% be pulling for it, as it is incredibly useful for a few stages we've got coming down the pipe soon, even just as a call. As for Yshtola and Setzer, I can freely skip them as I have their kits already. However, if the banner does feature Freya, then I'll be pulling for her. I never got a chance to use her with her LD on JP, and I'd like to take a crack at it this time. She's been a favourite ever since her Cosmos debut, so I'm excited to see what we can cook up. I was convinced about Freya, to be honest. I didn't think that I would have wanted her, because I'm dead set on Kayn. But there are reasons to have Freya, if not Kayn, because we have other sources of off-turn damage that are going to be really strong coming up as well, like Sisney. So I kind of thought, overloading on that maybe might not be the best idea. But honestly, with FR era, it's a good idea to load up on. Any source of off-turn damage, particularly ones that allow you to kind of turn hog with another character like Tidus, or Kamlanor, or Terra, or any BT character for that matter, are going to be valuable going forwards. So Freya does have value, but she does return very quickly in FR era. She comes back with Ursula, who isn't too far away. She's with Gabrant's batch, I believe, and therefore it's not too long to wait if you're happy to wait for her to come back. Okay, so now for the big question. Should you be pulling on Alphinaud and Wakka? Maybe Yshtola, if that's what's coming with her. Maybe even Freya, if it turns out that is what she's coming out on with the May Faire banners. Now, largely, apart from Freya, I think it's a pretty resounding no, even though I and many people will pull for Alphinaud based on fandom or, challenges, things like that. I don't think that Alphinaud is particularly valuable to many players' accounts, and that's because, unfortunately, his new gimmick of having his HP poison is also his biggest downfall. They've fixed his biggest problem, and his damage isn't terrible. It's actually quite good if you use him in the right ways, but the HP poison slows a lot of fights to a crawl, so I might end up having to speed up some of my videos a little bit, and because HP poison doesn't scale with force time percentage benefits, the chance of you using Alphinaud after the next couple of months is probably going to be very small. And that's really unfortunate because I love the way Alphinaud plays. I love a lot of stuff about him, but these drawbacks that have come out for him are really quite heavy. Wakka does have some really nice benefits to his LD call and his regular call, actually. Anyone who's been watching Jack Garland being played on JP, seriously, what is that? Can we just for a second? He benefits a lot from Max Bravery, and therefore Wakka, having the largest Max Bravery boost in his regular call, has a unique use later down the line. But also, the LD call, like I said earlier, has ways of circumventing immunities to certain status effects. So, like I said, Shulk's Lost Chapter gets you around the confusion immunity because it's not confusion, it's status reels. Now, Yshtola gets a lot more damage, which is great. But I think if you've lived without her up until this point, you could probably live without her now. She's not on her own for having big brave gains on her BT plus effect. Yes, she gets a lot of HP dumps on Afflatus Misery, and she gets a much more improved version of Stone. But that's kind of it. Like, I think that there's a lot of other characters that you could take that do similar things to Yshtola, that do better things with their turns than Yshtola does. But if you're a fan of FF14 and Yshtola, and Alphinaud for that matter, then you can definitely make them work. Like, Yshtola's definitely not a bad character. She does a lot with what she can do, but I wouldn't pull for her at this point. Freya, I've had my mind changed on her quite heavily. Like, I was not so interested in her to begin with, because when I was doing research into what I want to do for future pulls, which is coming soon, it just takes a lot of research to do, then I wasn't sure I was going to use her, because I was going to use either Cissnei or Kain for most things. But I like what Freya brings to the table now, as someone who doesn't currently own Kain LD, so I would like to pick that up, even if not now, then later down the line when she comes back with Ursula FR, because there's a lot of applications for her where she is useful. Like, you'll want that little bit of healing between heavy enemy damage turns. So I do think that she's very cool. Gem worthy? Not at this point in time, but I think she's definitely worth picking up at some point. So that's going to be all for today's video. Nice calm week when it comes to Dissidia this week. Next week we should have a bit more going on, because obviously we have the May Faire banners happening on the Monday, and then we'll have hopefully Snow's batch turning up later on in the week as well. So let me know in the comments below whether you're pulling for Alphinaud, Wakka. Do you think that Freya is that next banner, or do you think maybe it's going to be somebody else, or are you actually pulling for Yshtola? Let me know and let everyone else know what you think. Thank you ever so much for joining me today. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell for notifications. And I will see you next time. Have a lovely day, everyone, and I'll see you later, beautiful. Bye now.